Morning, folks. You'll have to excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold, so it makes my normal dreary voice even worse, so bear with me, and 35 minutes till coffee if you can hang on. So, just a bit about CCV before I start. CCV is, probably most of you have never heard of us, other than the sponsors that are in the room. We're an insurance broker consolidator, effectively, and we have a number of branches throughout the UK, all of which trade under their normal or their prior to acquisition brand name, effectively. So most of you won't have heard of us. You will have heard of probably our sister company, Towergate Insurance, who effectively are the big sister of ours. So we've got a UK-wide network of brokers. We're one of the UK's largest privately owned brokers, created in 2006. We control GWP of about 230 million, and we've completed around 60 acquisitions since that time. So roughly we run at around one or two a month. So quite a large rate of change, as you can imagine. More than 50 offices, around 800 staff, and as I've already said, sister company of Towergate. As you can see, our multi-brand strategy leads us to quite a diverse range of brands in the marketplace, and also lends itself to the fact that a lot of people don't actually know who CCV is as the umbrella, but we leverage the fact that our trading in the local marketplace of those businesses as regional brokers remains consistent, even though the business has been acquired. So how have we leveraged the benefits of cloud computing and created the transformational new business model? Actually, it's sort of a bit inverted, really. We as a business, because we started in 2006, cloud computing was already coming to the fore, and in my time with Towergate, we'd been through quite a transformation in terms of growing the business. So a very similar model to the way CCV operates now: grow by acquisition, bolt on more and more businesses, and all of you know from an IT perspective, that ratcheting up of users, infrastructure, systems, requirements, applications can be absolutely a nightmare at the best of times. Never mind where you've got a business that's growing by 1,000 users sometimes in a year. So quite difficult for us. And we learned some valuable lessons during that time. So as I approached building out the systems and IT infrastructure for CCV, I actually looked at it in a different way, which was actually, how do I make the infrastructure easier to manage, have a low cost base, a low resource requirement, but also deliver a consistent and reliable service to the users. So I've got an agenda here of some of the things I'm going to run through today. So what was the business need? And we sort of touched on that now. How did we select the right applications? What were the challenges that we faced delivering those? The importance of senior buy-in, which obviously is pretty important. How it's transformed the business. How the IT functions evolved from back office to business architects, and what's going to be next for us. So the business case really, as I've alluded to in my warm-up, was really more about agility, that the growth of the business, the speed of change, the rate of change, and actually plugging people into services. It's got to be able to scale. So here I am, I'm at 800 or 900 users now. How many am I going to have next year? Actually, I don't really know. The board might know. We've got a pipeline of acquisitions that we're looking at. Some of those might be 2 users, some of them might be 500. But from my perspective, I have to be able to deliver a consistent service and plug them into that service as quickly as possible. I need a small infrastructure footprint. So even though I deliver services to nearly 900 users, I only burn about 2 racks of central data center rack space in Docklands, which for us is pretty small when you compare it to Towergate. Okay, they're 4 times the size, but they're also running somewhere in the region of 25 to 30 racks, but on a different model. I needed a low admin overhead, so actually I don't want people sitting around playing with mail and spam control, all of those types of functions on a daily basis. Actually, what I want to do is outsource that. I want the crown jewels of people sitting in my IT function, the people that are delivering projects and actually making a real value change to the business. I want some SLA-driven services around that as well. So if it's not consistent, if it's not working how I want it to, I don't want people sitting around having to go away and think about fixing it. If it's not right, I want to pick up the phone to the supplier, ask them to get it sorted, know that it's going to be fixed in a reasonable amount of time, and effectively crack on with our core business, which actually is about selling insurance. And obviously all of those things lend themselves to a nice turnkey solution effectively, but bolting all of those turnkey solutions together to give a nice consistent experience for the end users. So how do we pick the right applications? Well, as Simon alluded to in the previous presentation, it's all about the data, and it's all about classifying the data that you see as either risky, medium tier in terms of risk, or low risk. And I think what you need to do is look at those and look at the ones that you can take out of your enterprise to give you those quick wins. So we went for the easy wins. We looked at things like internet access control. We looked at mail filtering by the use of products like Mimecast, which also added another benefit to the fact that the users could then self-service their mail spam, which took a load off our integral help desk. We went for products that have ease of integration. So Simon again alluded to the fact, and I said this to him when he came off actually, that he'd stolen most of my material, so thanks for that. It absolutely should be seamless. From an end user perspective, it should be business as usual. So as the service transition's over, one day they've got one thing, the next day they've got the next, and there should be a nice performance upside to that, but actually very low impact to them. We managed to switch over all of our mail flow support on a weekend. The users came in on the Monday morning, we'd pre-briefed them, everything worked as it should have, and the users are actually significantly more happy now that they can manage their own spam control and release their own messages rather than having to phone up the help desk, sit in a queue, wait for someone to log into the portal. So that's just one example, but there are several of those. Some of the other things that we looked at as well are backup services. So InTechnology, who are one of the sponsors for today, they've been running the backup services for Towergate and CCV for quite some time now. When we built the initial IT infrastructure in CCV, we were using local tape devices. We've subsequently moved, and because of the tape devices, there's a user input required to change those tapes, so the human factor, we removed that by moving to the InTechnology MBS service, and subsequently we've had one backup failure probably in the last 12 months. And that was predominantly down to the fact that we had a file that couldn't be accessed. The guys went into it the following morning, reran the job, everything was done. So a really nice, consistent backup regime, and those guys can deliver us a really rapid recovery service as well, from effectively anywhere, because it's a cloud service. So regardless of where we need to recover to, as long as we've got a box and we've got access to the internet, we can recover the data. If we haven't got access to the internet, those guys will burn that data onto a disk and ship it to us as fast as humanly possible. So there's some real advantages to moving to some of these commodity services for areas that you probably wouldn't consider provide you with great value at the moment. A lot of people, when they talk about cloud services, look at all the front-end stuff, the Salesforce.com, the application-driven services, whereas actually you can take some of your standard back-office processing services, move those into the cloud, and reduce your admin overhead. So what were the challenges we faced? Well, I'm sure most of you have heard pretty much all of these challenges in the past. Regulatory and compliance. We're an insurance business. It actually makes it relatively straightforward for us because we've got a load of people that worry about the risk on a daily basis. So our regulatory and compliance folks are actually, they're pretty relaxed about cloud computing to a certain degree. If we look at the quality of the service providers, most of them have what you'd probably gauge as better security staff than you've probably got internally. I was at a round table just this week, and there was a security specialist there who had been an ethical hacker for 2 to 3 years. He now worked for a risk organisation, and he blatantly sat there and said, actually, it doesn't matter what level of security you've got on-premise, in the cloud, anywhere in the world, I can right now go to a site and punch a hole through it and get to your data. Right now. Absolutely 100% confident of that fact. So I said to him, well, if that's the case, Mark, and you're here talking about security, how uncomfortable are you about the security of the cloud? And he said, I'm not uncomfortable about it at all. Actually, I'm really comfortable about it. You know, you go and sign up for security services or a service with InTechnology, for example, they'll probably have 10 to 12 security guys looking to protect their environment and your data continuously. They'll have 24/7 services looking at penetration. They'll have guys that are absolutely looking at cutting edge, day one threats to their environment. And actually, that's probably maybe 1,000% more security resource than you've got on-premise or in your environment right now. So I think you have to take quite a pragmatic approach to the security components, but also a measured approach with regard to the threats that exist to your data. So that sort of relates to my earlier comment about breaking the data down. But actually, as it stands right now, I think cloud's actually evolving into quite a secure and interesting place. I think the point about compliance, the EU directive, the new EU data directives, which are being worked on, but also the fact that someone needs to effectively update the regulators, because the regulators aren't at pace with how clouds and IT services are progressing at the moment. So actually, we need something like an ISO 27002, which covers cloud, but we also need someone to go into the regulators and say, actually, you guys need to keep up with this because it's moving at a rate faster than you can keep up. In fact, the whole IT industry is moving at a rate faster than anybody can keep up. One thing that I found out this week is there are 400 different code languages coming out in the world daily. So how do you keep up with that? These guys are writing security threats that will penetrate your environment, our environments, undetectable malware on a daily basis, and actually we can't see it. So it sort of puts into perspective where the risk to putting your data into the cloud is. Your last form of defence is only as weak as the weakest person in the chain, and that might be the person that works in your MI team, who has access to all of the data. They can burn it off to a USB or just print it out right now. So I'm not sure that the cloud is actually the main bugbear in the security chain. Obviously, Simon touched on legal earlier. Obviously, the legal guys get together, they disagree about a load of stuff, end up with probably a contract which probably isn't fit for purpose, but everybody agrees will do for now, and then effectively you sign up to your service. One of the things you need to consider there is actually the back out plan. So if you've decided to go with a service provider, you change your mind after the 3-year term or something better comes up, think about how you get your data back, the format that it comes back to you in, and can you then use that to take to an alternative service provider. SLAs go in hand with the legal. We've talked about the security components. Cost is quite interesting. So Simon alluded to the fact that we're moving from a CapEx model to an OpEx model. That's great if you're working for a cash-rich business. If you've got a business that's looking to drive the profit line, then obviously the OpEx model is not going to help that, because quite often the OpEx costs are slightly inflated over the capital model. So you really have to do a bit of work to make sure that those numbers stack up. Now, they do stack up, but the problem you have is you've got to delve down into the deep layers of, have you got someone managing your network switches? Have you got someone logging into the portal on a daily basis to check your existing environment? All of those subjective and soft costs which relate to that service at the moment that you outsource need to be included. And most of the services that you can outsource to the cloud. I mean, we've seen somewhere in the region of a 25 to 30% saving, but you do need to get the numbers right. And then one of the biggest challenges we've faced is the emotional attachment, not of the business to their data, and I know that quite a few financial services organisations, they absolutely will be entrenched in keeping their hands on the data. And I've heard talk about GE, their data has to be kept, you know, in a locked room, and there's one guy who goes in and uses a terminal, and that's pretty much it. But the emotional attachment of the IT function to having a piece of tin sitting in the data centre that you can go and look at and make sure the lights are on and it's there doing a thing. Well, actually, once you disconnect yourself from that and just think about the service that you're delivering to your customers, then I think you actually start to move into a better place rather than just worrying about an IT function and the people that deliver that. And then we've got data centre costs. Those are the other tangible benefits as well. As I said, we run on two racks worth of kit. We were consolidating that down even from 2006, so that footprint's getting even smaller. So those costs do reduce. The importance of senior buying at top level to support a successful outcome. This is quite an interesting point. We're all trusted leaders and advisors in our businesses, aren't we? So actually, if we go to our senior stakeholders, we should be able to tell them that this thing we're going to deliver them, this new service, this new bells and whistles, will actually it'll do what it says on the tin. I think part of the problem we've got these days is our senior stakeholders are getting pretty switched onto this cloud stuff, because most of them use a bit of, well, they use iCloud, so therefore they're in the cloud. They know what it's all about, don't they? And they can sync their iPhone to their Mac that they've brought into work that you don't really want in there because it's not secure. So these guys have a limited experience, and I think that's part of the problem. So actually, once we can explain it to them in clear terms as to how the service works and make them understand the risks, give them demonstrations of the service and the flexibility that service can give to them, it's actually pretty easy to get our story across, I think. We've talked about the security concerns. Actually, if we turn around to them and say, well, to be honest with you, we think the security is going to be better in the new service than we've got now, and we won't have people having to worry about it on a daily basis because we're signing up to an SLA and a guaranteed service, we should be in a good place. And then one of the questions we always get asked in Towergate and CCV by the chief exec is, so what? So what if you want to pump your data out to a managed backup service? What difference does that make to me? And just play that around in your mind before you go in and have that presentation, because that's always a really interesting one, and it can always be fired at you at any point. So just think about the different connotations. At the end of the day, my exec could turn around to me and say, so what, why don't we use tapes now? They're okay, aren't they? We've used those tapes things for years. You just put them in a briefcase, take them onto site. How bad can it be? And that's where the answer of, well, if we lose one of those, we have to declare it to the FSA, and then they come along and charge us £7 million for losing one of them because we've lost a load of client data. It starts to focus the mind quite quickly that spending another £5 grand on an OPEX solution might actually be the right answer and save him going to jail. So that's always a good thing. So going beyond mere cost cutting, quick question for you. How many of you in the room don't have cloud services at the moment? So not many. So I think that's probably about the right answer. Of a survey undertaken, 84% of businesses that were surveyed actually had cloud services in their businesses that they didn't know about. And this relates to the point that Simon made earlier, which is somebody within your organisation going out and buying compute power with a company credit card, or signing up to a service, or even using Facebook. Facebook's a cloud application. Some of us in here will be putting information about what we're doing today. I'm going to the Cloud Circle forum. Therefore, we're imparting potentially business information out into the cloud. That's in the public arena. So many businesses are already using cloud functions and delivering those services or engaging in those services than they already know about. So some of the benefits to us are, in terms of the speed of change of CCV, the new acquisitions coming in, one thing we have is our compliance guys have already been around and said, yep, your mail filtering service works, yep, your web filtering service works. We're happy with all of those components that you plug into the businesses. So when we buy those businesses, we can literally turn around and plug those services into them straight away. So immediately, our compliance guys get a bit more comfortable because we're engaging and making sure that we're compliant from an FSA perspective. We can deliver faster integrations. We don't have to build out a load of kit to go and deliver those integrations. We now deliver a thin client Citrix desktop environment to our new acquisitions. We build that on the infrastructure as a service platform within InTechnology. We can contact them, spin up a new Citrix server, build it off our Citrix provisioning server, and it can be ready literally within a couple of hours. All we're actually waiting for then is the network connectivity to get those guys plugged in. So it really does give us that flexibility. Less travel. We're using OCS, so Microsoft OCS, or commonly called Link now, quite extensively within the business. We've started deploying that over the last year, and that's seen quite a significant amount of travel reduction. We now do desktop sharing and presentations using that product, but people just chat via it. It allows people to communicate. They're not sending emails, so they're not burning up a load of my storage by sending to and from emails which grow in size and then effectively get stored forever and a day, twice, because they're intent items as well. But there's less cost associated with that as well. A really, really cheap solution. We talked about moving from a capital to an OPEX model. Mid to short-term solutions are now a viable option. So one of the things I have to consider is CCV will ultimately be subsumed into Towergate. So all the infrastructure I build in CCV now, at some point I'm going to throw it away, and I'll probably de-engineer that environment into the Towergate environment because they're building a nice new data center and moving all their services into that. So infrastructure as a service really lends itself quite nicely to that, in the fact that I don't have to hang around waiting for technology to change. So at the moment I'm running thick client. I want to build out a thin client architecture. I don't want to go and spend £1 million on a nice SAN to do all my storage and move all my VMs around. Actually, I can just engage InTechnology to do that for me. Spin that environment up, run it, maybe for a year or a year and a half, and then when I'm ready, move those virtual machines over into the Towergate physical environment and turn those services off. So where we hear about people flexing their compute resources up, and most people come back down to a watermark, in this instance, I'm actually going to flex my compute resources up and then effectively in the future, chuck it away. And that way I don't have a load of tin sitting around that, A, I'm probably never going to use again, because how many people reuse 3-year-old servers? Not many, really. And also, all that effort and investment in terms of racking, stacking, the depreciation of the kit, pre its end of life, all of those issues go away. We can use those services also as a transitioning service. So effectively, that's what I'm going to be doing with building my Citrix environment. I'm going to be building out a Citrix environment, migrate all the users from a thick client environment to a thin, and then move it across. Makes it significantly easier. Really good for testing and development as well, spinning up tin as and when required, testing environments, and then spin it back down. A really, really nice model. And no significant investment in infrastructure. So as I said, I don't need to buy a big storage area network. So how's the IT function evolved? Well, many of you will know, years ago, IT were in the back room, in a dark room, in the basement, kept in the dark. And the IT crowd was probably quite a good example of how we operated or were seen by our users. That's moved significantly now. We're much more integrated into the business. And I was at a round table a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about funny enough, big data, and one of the guys was arguing about how valuable that data is to the business. And I said to him, well, just take it away from them for 24 hours, because they'll all be busting down your door. And if people don't understand the value of IT right now, or understand how integral it is to the business, go and turn it off for a couple of hours, or threaten to, because they'll soon realise that actually they can't last without it for about 30 seconds to a minute. That's the real terms. So we're much more intrinsically linked to the business now, hopefully significantly built into the business plans. Obviously, e-com has a massive impact on that, and all of these things are hooked together. And yet still, we probably have to sit around the boardroom table and say, engage us at the earliest opportunity for your projects. Don't think about your new distribution to market and then come to us at the 11th hour and say, well, can you just build this for us, or we just need this nice interface into this other supplier. So we've definitely moved into that space. I think it will continue to evolve as the cloud compute services come along, because we'll be able to leverage those nice services that people are delivering out on the internet for us to be able to provide better services to the business. And big data is just one component of that. I mean, there's people out there now that will actually provide MI and business analytics on your data, and all you've got to do is send it to them. You know, stuff like that is really good, but obviously there are security concerns about dumping your whole client database out to a third party that you need to address. So what's next? So certainly for us, it's to build out and engage more cloud services. We like the model. I like the model. It works for the business. At the end of the day, they want to come in, fire up their workstation, and it works. We find that actually those cloud services really provide us with that level of service that we're looking for. I think IT will definitely progress to a commodity service. I don't think it will get to the point of where electricity is for some time to come yet, but I think it will get to that point at some point down the line. And I think that will be quite an exciting time, actually. The infrastructure in the businesses will reduce. It will become easier for us to manage. Bring your own devices will develop, because the compute desktop will become a commodity service, and all of those issues about managing the desktop and user interface will hopefully reduce slightly. I think the advent of tin in private data centers will reduce. People like Dell, HP, IBM will actually just be building massive data centers, and we'll be plugging into them for services in time to come. And for me, it will be more acquisitions, more acquisitions, and more acquisitions. We just keep going on and on and on. They keep coming through my door. The big conveyor belt of acquisition pipeline never stops. I think I've dealt with about 160 now over my time in the group, so I think I'm just about getting the hang of them now, but someone keeps changing the IT interface, so I have to keep keeping up with it. So that's it from me. Thanks very much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed that presentation and learned a little bit about some of the things on the ground, and maybe opened up some thoughts. Thanks very much.